every day I go into Pleb Lab and I try to think what would be a cool thing to work on today. And I make it and I ship it. I just I get to work on whatever I want, and that allows me the freedom to just keep on pumping out Bitcoin projects. I really like inventors. I like when I see someone who comes up with lots of really cool ideas. I get inspired by it, I admire it, and I want to do the same. So it's a really simple way to start a web store. It automatically gives you a Bitcoin address and a Bitcoin wallet and a Lightning wallet, all in the browser, and it just makes it really easy to get started with selling stuff online. I consulted on the creation of Nostr. So before Fiat Jeff released it, he contacted me and Ben Ark and a couple other people, and he asked us if we would help him design this thing. One of the things that I thought Nostr would be really good for when Nostr came out was coordinating group Bitcoin transactions that have multiple payers or multiple recipients. And the first one I tried to do with that was CoinJoins. There's more stars on GitHub projects relating to Nostr than there are on GitHub projects relating to the Lightning Network, for example.
Super Testnet is an independent Bitcoin, Lightning, and Nostr developer, as well as the chairman of free and open source software at Pleb Lab. Now, Super is also one of the most prolific innovators in the Lightning ecosystem, and in our conversation, we got into how Super is able to maintain such a high cadence of innovation and invention, and we talked about some of the projects that Super has built, including HODL Contracts. We got into his Nostr-powered Webstore swap service. We got into his mobile CoinJoin wallet and his Spacechain launcher. If you enjoy this episode and if you learn something new, the best way to show your support for this show is by sending in sats over the Lightning Network. You can use any Podcasting 2.0 app to do that. There are dozens of them out there, but my favorite one to use is Fountain. Before we get into today's show, just a quick message from our sponsors. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Stackwork. And Stackwork is a Lightning-powered transcription tool that takes the best of AIs and humans to create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. We'll have more from Voltage and Stackwork later in the show. Super. Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time. I'm so excited to discuss all that you've been building in the Bitcoin and Lightning and Nostr ecosystem. This is going to be a blast.
Well, man,
Thank you
I'm
for joining.
excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's get into, we have a lot of projects to cover. You have built a handful of different projects. It seems like every 2 or 3 weeks, I go onto Stacker News and I see your name at the top with a brand new project you've created. But before we get into those, that's like my
go
into
goal,
your
man.
background.
Every week I have a goal. It's like, I want to get in the top of Stacker News this week. And it's a successful week if I can be the number one. So,
well, you've had many successful weeks.
Yeah.
I've seen you on top a number of times with your latest projects. But first, let's give people a background on Super Testnet. Tell everyone a bit about your life prior to Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I won't do that, but I will tell you something that's just as interesting. So I will tell you how I got into Bitcoin.
Sure.
Back in 2010 was the first time that I heard about Bitcoin, and the context was it involved our government doing something really stupid. Actually, they did a very similar thing recently. They were about to not pay our debts. We had racked up a whole bunch of debt because of bailouts and stuff that had been going on in 2008 and 2009. And some of the senators in office were like, let's just not pay it. There's nothing that says we have to pay our debts. And the media called this going off the fiscal cliff. They were like, if we don't pay our debts, we'll be going off the fiscal cliff. It'll be terrible for the economy. And I just thought this whole thing was like nuts. I was like, how did we get to a situation where A, we can rack up so much tremendous debt as a country, and then B, that it's so much that some of the people in charge are just like, let's not even pay it. And I wondered if there wasn't some way to use the internet to like take the money out of the hands of politicians. The internet had solved so many other things at that point, and I was like, maybe the internet can be used to solve money. So before I had ever heard of Bitcoin or anything, I went home and I started Googling things like internet money, digital digital currency, stuff like that. And Bitcoin came up back in those days, and so I started reading a little bit about Bitcoin, and I was like, I didn't understand that it was a decentralized protocol at that point. I thought it was like a company who was like trying to be like PayPal, but with a different money that had a limited supply. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I could see how that could really take off. I'm upset with the way our government's doing money, and these people, these Bitcoin people, seem to be trying to, come up with an alternative to that. So I just decided to just watch Bitcoin so every now and then I would just check in on it. The next time I heard about it was with WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks was like this website where people could go and upload secret documents of their governments that prove that their governments were committing crimes and stuff like that, leaks. And they got in trouble because somebody uploaded some stuff about crimes that American government officials had committed. And so, like Visa and Mastercard and PayPal all dropped them from the ability to use their platforms to raise money. And the only thing WikiLeaks had left was Bitcoin. So it came up in the news that this happened to WikiLeaks, and the only way you could contribute to them financially was through Bitcoin. And I was like, oh, I know about Bitcoin. That's that thing I looked up a couple months ago. So I like went to check on Bitcoin Talk forums to see what people were thinking about that. And it was interesting at the time. I remember reading this post by Satoshi where he had there was like a thread about this WikiLeaks thing and how it was in the media. And Satoshi seemed to get really scared about that. He was like, uh, it's like they've kicked the hornet's nest, and I don't think we're ready. He talked about Bitcoin's not ready for them to come after it. And then I guess he left. Like that post that I, read by him was apparently his last one ever. He just never posted again after that. It was like he fled or something. Um, but yeah, that was like because of that moment, and then like some stuff that happened after that, I gradually started to realize that Bitcoin actually wasn't a company. Like the guy who was supposedly in charge of it had no control over who was using it, because he seemed to be really upset about WikiLeaks giving such publicity to Bitcoin, but there was nothing he could do about it because he actually wasn't in control. So I kept on watching Bitcoin over the years. I remember some of my next memories. I remember in 2013, some people brought up various altcoins that existed at the time, which I thought was really stupid. I didn't even have any Bitcoin at this point, but I was just like talking with him. I was like, "Well, what do these altcoins do that Bitcoin doesn't?" And like, no one had any answers. And I was just like, I remember arguing with people like, "Well, if they don't do anything new, then it doesn't seem like they're any better than why don't we just use Bitcoin?" Um, but I actually didn't purchase any until the year 2017, when Bitcoin crossed the $1,000 threshold for the second time. I was like, okay, I've been watching this thing for too long without having any, and I'd really like to. So I set a goal for myself that I was going to purchase some Bitcoin in the year 2017 by a certain date. And on that date, I did. I went and found a Bitcoin ATM, put in my money, got the Bitcoin out, started experimenting with it, using it for various things, and I went all in. I was like, wow, this thing's amazing. I really love this, and so I just put everything I had into Bitcoin that same month, the first
Very
time I ever
cool.
bought any. So that's what brought me into Bitcoin was watching it for many years and thinking it was really cool, finding
That's
out
really
how
interesting.
that it's decentralized, and then yeah, going all in.
Yeah. So, do you think you had a different onboarding experience or a different, do you think you had been primed to think about Bitcoin differently because you had come in with the problem already in your mind?
Mhm.
You went looking for the solution to a problem you already knew existed, rather than I think what a lot of Bitcoiners take is the approach of hearing first about Bitcoin, going, this seems pretty cool, and people seem to be excited about it, and then digging into, oh, here's how it works, here's why it's important, and kind of slowly coming to realize why it's necessary. Do you think you had a different kind of onboarding experience as a result of your first introduction to it?
I think for most people, Bitcoin finds them first. Somebody brings it up to them and says, you should check out this Bitcoin thing. But that's not how it was for me. I went searching for Bitcoin. I had a problem in mind, and I wondered if anyone had come up with a solution, and Bitcoin came up as a search result. So yeah, I think it was a little bit different for me, and yeah, I've always seen it from that light as a way to remove the money from the hands of government officials. Only later, much later, did I find out you could actually program it and make it do like tricks. And so
Hmm.
after that same year that I bought Bitcoin, I also started learning to program. It was a big year for me, and some of the first stuff I did in programming was do Bitcoin stuff and just learn how to program with Bitcoin.
Very cool. And at this point, this is 2017. So
Mhm.
had you heard about what Lightning was at the time? Did you have a sense for like you may be able to do some programming and make small payments and things like that? Or were you still thinking of Bitcoin as just this tool to remove money from the hands of government?
The first when I jumped into the Bitcoin scene, SegWit was all the rage. It was in the middle of the SegWit activation wars, and so the first thing I did was research how SegWit works and try to get my head around that, and start talking to people about it on Reddit at the time. So I remember learning how SegWit worked and then responding to people who also had questions about it and trying to explain it to them. And one of the things that SegWit was popularized for was that it could enable this thing called the Lightning Network. So I started researching how that worked, which is much harder to learn than SegWit itself. And after learning a little bit about Lightning, yeah, I thought it was kind of neat. And in 2018, when Raspberry Bolt came out with their guide for setting up the Lightning Network on a Raspberry Pi, I followed that guide and began programming with the Lightning Network as far back as 2018.
Very cool. So you have had a much longer history of following and building on Lightning Network than I have. I've only been looking at it really in the last couple of years, but I'd love to hear your perspective on the trajectory in the number of builders working on Lightning. What do you think that the catalyst was? Because from my understanding, in 2018, there were very few people building on Lightning, and there was not much to do on Lightning yet.
Hmm.
Today, that is not the case. I'd love to hear your kind of perspective, having watched the last 5, 6 years unfold, and see like what were the catalysts in your view that got us from 2018, where there's very few people on Lightning, to now 2023, where there's a proliferation of Lightning apps and builders building all sorts of cool stuff.
Um, One of my early memories that is related to your question about the Lightning Network was a video by Alex Bosworth, in which he went over what swaps are. Alex Bosworth, I don't know if it's correct to call him the inventor of submarine swaps, but he certainly was an early proponent of those things. And he made this YouTube video that was like terribly shot, very grainy on a terrible background with really bad audio. But I thought it was amazing. He gave like an hour presentation on all the different things you can do with submarine swaps, including like data transfer, conditional payments, but it was just a really cool presentation with a bunch of stuff in it. Um, and like he was one of the only ones I think who was um, thinking about really cool, novel types of things you could do with Lightning other than just payments from one person to another. Um, so yeah, I think the so your question was how many what led to a situation where there's all sorts of cool things you can do with Lightning. Um, I think it's just the proliferation of tooling that allows you to do really cool things. Like we didn't really have good browser extensions for interacting with Lightning payments back then, but now we have Alby. We didn't have we had a couple of different implementations, but their developer documentation wasn't very good, and that's been built out over the years. I think there's a lot more implementations now. Back then, there was only the Go implementation by Lightning Labs and the Core Lightning one, and the Core Lightning one by Blockstream, which is in C, and there was Eclair's Async, which was in Scala. But now we have like the Electrum implementation in Python, and we have LDK and Rust. I think the the build out of additional implementations opens a wider door for more developers to take part and play with these things.
That makes sense. Are there any features or implementations or innovations that you think could further open doors to onboarding new developers that we haven't accessed yet. Because like we've surely grown the Lightning ecosystem, but when you look at all developers, Lightning is still a small fraction, right? The activity and the usage of Lightning has an enormous amount of room to grow. So what are some of the unlocks that we could pursue in the future to onboard all these other developers and users that are not currently using Lightning?
I would love to see a JavaScript implementation of Lightning, because JavaScript is the programming language that I most frequently work with. And I think that a lot of the developers in the Ethereum ecosystem are also JavaScript developers. And I would love to see them come over to Bitcoin and learn how to learn how to manage Lightning channels, create Lightning channels for their users, and stuff like that in a browser or browser extension context. And that's something that it's I think that when you look at something like Alby, which tries to let you use the Lightning Network in the browser, um, one of the challenges of it is the onboarding. Like you either have to pick the custodial option or you have to download and configure a Lightning implementation. And that is a real turnoff for developers when they're like, I have to have my users download and install something. I would really just like to have them click a button and it just works. Um, so I think enabling that through a JavaScript implementation of Lightning that can actually run entirely in your browser would be awesome. Um, in that direction, the Mutiny gentlemen from Mutiny Wallet have created a WebAssembly implementation of the Lightning Network, which is really cool, and it allows you to do pretty much the same thing. But it's yeah. So I think more efforts in that direction and kind of building that out will be huge. I think it'll allow people from it'll allow Ethereum people to play with Lightning for the first time, and I think that'll be really cool.
What is it specifically about JavaScript or WebAssembly that allows people? Can you connect the dots for me there? I'm not sure I follow why JavaScript is so important to give people that one-click experience where they don't need to do anything else.
JavaScript is the only programming language that works in the browser. We used to have a bunch of other ones. We used to have this thing called Flash, and Flash was a programming language that you could use to create applications in the browser. We used to have Java web applets that allowed you to create programs in Java, and they would run in people's browser. And then we have JavaScript. But the other, and we had Microsoft's Silverlight was another one. We had all these different programming environments that would work in people's browsers, but all of them have gone away except for JavaScript. It's the only one left. So if you want to allow developers who are familiar with working in a web-based environment to make anything, it has to be available in JavaScript for them to work with. Otherwise, it just can't work in the browser. I say that, and then that's not quite true anymore, though, because now we have WebAssembly. WebAssembly came out, and it's faster than JavaScript, and it also works in the browser. So now that that exists, there's like a new programming environment that you can work with, and that's what the Mutiny guys are are doing. I personally have never worked with WebAssembly, and I don't know how it works. So I'm not a good person to talk to about that, but I'm really excited that they've made something and are pushing forward with it.
I see. I appreciate you clarifying that. Okay, let's start this conversation with some of the projects you built. We've alluded to this at the beginning of the show. You have a lot of projects that you have been sharing on Stacker News. We're going to go through a list of them today. But first, I want to step back and just understand how you are able to ship so many new products at such a high cadence. Because I've noticed with these projects, they're not like you're doing what someone else just did in a slightly different way. Mm-hmm. It's like you're coming up with a new primitive or a new idea, and it's something fresh that I hadn't come across before. And I'm just kind of in awe of the cadence and the quality of ideas that you're able to put out. And I'd love to like pull back the curtains and see like what are the inner workings of your brain and your time and how you schedule your time, and to be able to come up with so many ideas at such a high cadence.
So yeah, I kind of want to start this with talking about Pleb Lab, but it does go back before that because I started doing this. I started coming up with new Lightning stuff before I started working for Pleb Lab. It was very early on. It was very early on that I started doing this. So like, let me restart that sentence. Back in 2020, I quit my job and the job I was working at the time, and I started working on Lightning projects by just building stuff for clients. So like I started taking on clients who wanted Bitcoin or the Lightning Network integrated into their website somehow, and I would do that for them. An early example of this was Guy Swan's website. Guy Swan has a podcast where he reads Bitcoin articles, reads articles about Bitcoin, and he wanted a thing on his website where people could like vote on how to on what articles he should read next, vote with their Bitcoin. So like he was one of my first clients, and I kind of I quit my job and I started just taking on Bitcoin clients who would pay me in Bitcoin to make stuff that integrated Bitcoin into their website. And I did that for a while. And after building up a little bit of an income from that, I started working on stuff that just I was interested in, like stuff that people had, stuff that I knew how to do and that I thought was really cool, but that I hadn't seen anyone else working on. And it was when I began doing that, and I think this is like the year 2021. I found out about Pleb Lab because of Keon Kubita from Stacker News. He had put out a request on his Twitter for anyone interested in coming to work with him in his garage. He was like, I want to start a hackerspace in my garage. Would anyone be interested in just coming to Texas and working with me here? And so I raised my hand and I was like, I would love that, Keon, because I thought Stacker News was a really cool website and using Bitcoin in new ways. So I was like, that would be awesome. I would love to work with you. And that turned into Pleb Lab. Like within a month or so, it had taken on, like he and the other gentleman from Pleb Lab had purchased office space in a big downtown building, and it was becoming something much bigger. So I did an interview with them and showed them what I was working on at the time, and they were like, "Yeah, you can come in, and that we would love to have you in Pleb Lab." So I moved to Texas and started working on stuff at Pleb Lab, at Pleb Lab, and basically ever since, that's just been kind of what I do. Is every day I go into Pleb Lab and I try to think what would be a cool thing to work on today, and I make it and I ship it. I get to work on whatever I want, and that allows me the freedom to just keep on pumping out Bitcoin projects that do all this stuff that I just think of all the time. It's like every day I probably get like 4 or 5 new ideas of new things you can do with Bitcoin, and I just have to put them on the back burner so I can work on them later. But yeah, it's like there's like a constant flow of new possible inventions, and then it just has the time it takes to actually implement them and make them. It comes
Interesting.
after that.
How important is it that you have at Pleb Lab a high concentration of Bitcoiners also working on related ideas? Like what is the importance of that versus, you being, locked up in a room on your own trying to come up with new ideas?
One of the things that I like about it best is that I can get inspiration from other people. So at previous jobs I've worked at, if I was trying to work on a Bitcoin project, um, well, one of the things that happens when I work is a lot of the times I get stuck on a problem, and I decide to take a break. I step up from my computer and I go walk around and I talk to other people and see what they're doing, and I let my subconscious think about my problem, because I think my subconscious is a bit smarter than my conscious mind and it can solve things faster. Uh, so before Bitcoin, the things I would be talking to people about weren't related to it at all. But now they are. If I get up at Pleb Lab and I go and find out what someone else is working on, it's always some sort of Bitcoin project, and I might be able to contribute to it, or tell them some ideas or thoughts I have, or generate some ideas from them, get feedback off of them. It's just the fact that you're talking with and working with and walking with other Bitcoiners makes it so that the experience is much more fulfilling and much more like everyone wants to help you make this stuff. Like they're there for that. They're all in and supporting you. So that really makes a big difference.
Very cool. Now, I'd love to understand, you're coming up with all these ideas. I think in some people's minds, if they came up with a great idea, they'd be like, this is my idea. I've got to stick with it. I'm seeing this out until the very end and just wanting to get that idea as far as they could possibly take that individual idea. Why have you decided to kind of, it seems like you're taking an opposite approach where you go, I'm going to come up with all sorts of ideas, and just like you're taking the act of creating ideas to the extreme rather than a single idea to its endpoint. What's the reasoning there? Love to understand that.
I suppose it's what I like to see in other people. I really like inventors. I like when I see someone who comes up with lots of really cool ideas. I get inspired by it. I admire it, and I want to do the same. So yeah, I think that's cooler than just coming up with one and seeing and turning it into a really big thing. Um, Taking a whole bunch of small things and putting them out into existence for the first time is cooler to me. So that's what I do.
Very cool. Do you think Bitcoin can help with making this role of an inventor more sustainable? Because I can also see the angle of, someone who has an idea and wants to take that to its extreme. That is perfect for venture capital, right? And you can, there's a clear path to monetize that, to make your living sustainable. You can take a number of years and just go pursue that thing. But I don't know that there's a perfect model. You'll be able to speak to this better than I can, but is there a perfect model for people who just want to invent and just want to come up with a new idea, let it out into the world, then come up with another, let it out into the world? Do we have that funding model today? And if not, can Bitcoin help us get there?
Uh, One of the things that we have today in the Bitcoin world are grant programs. So, Geyser Fund is an example of someone who does that. I think Brink does grants. OpenSats does grants, and applying to these organizations, say, look at all the stuff that I'm in. Well, here's the contributions to the Bitcoin scene that I want to make, and do you think it's worth anything? I think that's the only way I've thought of for finding funding for this stuff, because I intentionally don't want to and try not to turn any of these ideas into companies. So I can't get the funding from to continue this stuff from that model, from like turning it into a profitable company, because I just don't want to do that. Um, so yeah, well, yeah, I shouldn't say I can't. I should say I just don't want to. And consequently, the only other option I've thought of is to apply for grants. Say, hey,
Hmm.
I'm helping in other ways. Please support me in this way.
Right. What is it about the company that you're not interested in pursuing? I'd love to understand that more.
Well, companies come with responsibilities. You have to work on a particular product or service, and just see it through to the end. And I get bored too easily with stuff. Like once I've made a thing, after a couple of weeks of it, I don't want to work on it anymore. So trying having the responsibility of doing that would be like doing that anyway would be very stressful for me. It'd be like, no, I'm not having fun. I'm not interested in this, and yet I have to do it anyway because now I have responsibilities to my investors or to my customers or whatever. And I'd rather not have any of that. I'd rather just keep on making new stuff.
Right. So to be optimally inventive, you have to kind of like shed those excess responsibilities that would come from sticking with one idea
Hmm.
so that you can go ahead and make many more ideas.
Yes.
Um, is the grant setup today that we have in the Bitcoin industry? You alluded to a few providers of grants. Is that optimal? Because I think you yourself probably have the best experience in going through building these ideas and knowing whether or not it is accessible and easy enough to get a grant for projects that you're working on.
Well, I've never gotten a grant for any project that I've worked on, so I guess
Mm,
that doesn't mean it's unoptimal. It might just be that I just don't know how to navigate that world.
I see. Okay.
So
Um,
I don't know if it's optimal or not.
Fair enough. Let's jump into some of the products you've been working on.
Mhm.
First thing, which is a product that is before I even knew you, is HODL contracts. Can you talk a little bit about what those are?
Yeah, HODL contracts are a way of emulating the experience of having, well, the user experience of DLCs on the Lightning Network. So what I wanted to do with HODL contracts is I wanted to allow people to make conditional payments that are conditional on real world events. An example might be a ball game. I would love it if you could send somebody a Lightning payment for, let's say, $500, but they only get that $500 if the Packers win the World Series. I think I mixed up some sports there, but
Yeah.
yeah, like only if this real world event happens does the payment go through. Uh, that's what I designed HODL contracts to be. I wanted to do that on Lightning. We've had ways to do that on Bitcoin Space Layer for many years. Actually, it's even talked about in the Bitcoin white paper, that you can use escrow to allow a payment to be conditional on something, on the say so of someone else. But when Lightning came out, it was a lot less. It threw away a lot of the uh, programming functionality that makes Bitcoin a very flexible programming environment. So I wanted to find a way to bring that back, to bring back the ability to have like business logic in a Lightning payment. And HODL contracts were the way I achieved that. So the user experience you get when you set up a HODL contract is you set out some terms and conditions, and you say, like, you and your counterparty, like I always use Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob agree on what should trigger the payment, and what real world event their payments should be conditional on, and then they make payments to one another. So Alice sends a $500 payment to Bob. Bob sends one to Alice, and both of them route through the same routing node. And the routing node then acts as an oracle. So routing nodes do not have to immediately forward a payment. They have the option of waiting until the payment expires before, like, they can wait all the way up until the payment expires, and either let it fail or forward it the rest of the way. So I make a routing node into an oracle there, where he reads the terms of their contract, waits until the ball game happens, and then whichever side wins, he allows the loser's payment to go through to the winner, and cancels the winner's payment to the loser, so that the winner gets their money back. And that way they end up with, if it's an Alice and Bob situation and Bob wins, Bob gets Alice's money and he gets his own money back. So he's the victor, and he gets the spoils. So I created HODL contracts, and you could do stuff like that. And then I wrote out a couple of other example contracts. So you can do the ball game contract in them, but you can also do lending with that, where Alice makes a payment to Bob, uh, which serves as collateral. And if Bob makes his and Bob gives Alice a certain amount of Bitcoin in return as principal. And then if Alice pays off her loan, if she sends Bob his payment back plus interest, then the Oracle cancels her collateral payment to Bob, and she gets her collateral back. Otherwise, if she doesn't make her payment, uh, the Oracle settles the collateral payment so that Bob gets Alice's collateral. So you can do lending with that. And then I showed how you could do futures contracts once you have lending. So that you can do a whole lot with this. You can do ball game contracts, lending, futures contracts, price gambling. You could do lotteries with it. You could basically add any kind of smart contracting you want, because the routing node that's between the two people who are paying each other acts as the person who runs the logic of the contract, and then settles the payment or cancels the payment based on what that logic tells them. So that's I think is one of the coolest things I've invented, was HODL contracts, and
Mm.
yeah, it's a really powerful tool that lets you do all sorts of really cool contracts on the Lightning Network.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you can do sports betting, you can do futures, you can do any sort of financial product.
Mm-hmm.
Um, has anyone picked up on the progress you made here and decided to like build out, sports betting on Lightning or some other application with it?
Nope. There was a company called Lightning Escrow who tried to use my technology to enable that, and they shifted after a couple of months of working on it. They shifted away and decided to just become Bit Escrow, where they don't support Lightning anymore. And part of the reason they did that is because of one of the drawbacks of using the Lightning Network for these types of payments, which is that Lightning payments, they time out after a certain amount of time. So I talked about how the Lightning, or the routing node between Alice and Bob, can wait until the payment expires, or he can wait all the way up to then, and like 5 seconds before it expires, he can either finish forwarding it or not. Well, the amount of time, the time limit for an expiration on a Lightning payment is only about a week. So he really only has about 1 week to make his decision. And that really limits the usefulness of these things. Like if you're going to do any kind of loan, it's probably for longer than a 1 week term limit. If you're going to do any kind of futures contract, it's probably longer than that. So really the only thing you could do with this probably is like sports betting, where you could set up the bet 3 days in advance of the game, and then use it for that. But BitEscrow wanted to do something more than they wanted. They wanted the more flexible option to have lots of different kinds of contracts, and so they dropped support for the Lightning Network after having worked on it for a couple of months. So they were the only ones, as far as I'm aware, that have actually tried to work with this technology. I also presented at it for a what's it called, a hackathon by the Bolt.fun folks. So there was a Bolt.fun hackathon a year ago, I think, where I presented HODL contracts and how to use them for this stuff. And I think one of the winners of that hackathon used them in his project. But I'm not aware of anyone else who's ever actually used them for anything.
Interesting. Yeah, I just think sports betting would be a perfect use case for this, just because I look at it's slightly different, but I look at derivatives for someone like LN Markets. I think they just had a record month in June of, I believe, $50 million in volume. It's like, that's a sizable amount. You could build a pretty solid sports betting business using this technology, and probably amass a similar market size, a similar amount of volume every month. Seems pretty reasonable to me. So glad that idea is out in the world. And hopefully this podcast can be illuminating for folks who have not yet heard of you, or have not yet heard of all the things you've built, and maybe someone will pick it up.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in building a sports betting website, or anything else that you think HODL contracts would be useful for, it's on my GitHub. It's a Python application with a REST API. You can try it out there, or if you have any questions, and I'm happy to help. If you want any help building it, I'm right here. So
cool.
Reach out to me.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage empowers engineers to integrate Bitcoin and Lightning Network payments into their business stack with an enterprise-grade experience. The team at Voltage is building the complete toolset so that you can do more than simply spin up nodes, but also understand and interpret your node's data. Their new product, Surge, gives engineers the capability to quickly solve problems and optimize operations. With node insights and visibility through time series data, you get dynamic and complex insights never available before. You can get complete control with insanely fast onboarding, advanced client-side encryption, and zero management infrastructure, making backups, networking, and upgrades simple. Get a free 7-day trial today at voltage.cloud. Let's get into your the next project. I think this is maybe have been the first project I saw after meeting you, was Void Wallet. This is I believe, a mobile CoinJoin wallet. Can you talk a little bit more about how that works?
Sure, yeah. So one of the things that I thought Nostr would be really good for when Nostr came out was coordinating group Bitcoin transactions that have multiple payers or multiple recipients. And the first one I tried to do with that was CoinJoins. So I created a Bitcoin wallet that allows you to press a button in it that says I want to do CoinJoins. I think it's called Join Pool. And so you press Join Pool on your phone or on your desktop if you're running it on desktop, and it puts you into a pool of people who want to do CoinJoins. And then you just do CoinJoins all the time for free. Your wallet will automatically coordinate with other people who want to do them, other people who are in the pool. And it'll just create these big group transactions where all of you do a big CoinJoin together. And it's triggered by a user who says, like, okay, I want to do a CoinJoin right now. They press a button and they pay a mining fee to process this CoinJoin that has a whole bunch of people in it. And all the people who are sitting in the pool just get a CoinJoin for free. Well, for free for them, paid for by the guy who wanted to do it immediately. So that was what Void Wallet enabled, and yeah, that's basically all it is. It's a wallet where you can put your money make it available to do CoinJoins with, and then just CoinJoin all the time in the background.
Why isn't this available for most Bitcoin wallets today? Like why aren't CoinJoins like a standard that everyone is using?
I think that I don't know. I don't know why it's not a standard. I suppose part of the difficulty of it is the coordination of trying to get many different people to co-sign a transaction. It takes quite a bit of work to get that to happen. And maybe it's just not like that when someone goes into making a Bitcoin wallet, they probably want to enable the user of the wallet to pay other people, and having them having them also have to figure out how to do coin joins, or having the developers also have to figure out how to do coin joins, might be something that they're just not. It wasn't in the scope for them when they decided to make this wallet. It's like, no, I just want to enable regular payments. Adding in all this coordination stuff is a big ask.
Right. But I imagine there's also for a company building out a Bitcoin wallet with CoinJoins, there's then an extra potential for revenue, right? With the coordination fee, potentially being able to capture that in addition to any kind of additional transaction fees.
Maybe the implementation that I made didn't have a coordinator really, because all of the people were already waiting to do the coin join, and then the person who was paying for it, just their wallet just selects a bunch of people to do it with, and does the coin join. So there was no one to take a coordinator fee in mine. But yeah, you certainly can have a model where you do have a coordinator and he takes a fee. I just don't know. That's one thing that I don't know why wallet people use wallets that have that. Like, why would you pay an extra fee for something that doesn't need to be a paid for service? You could
Mhm.
make them cheaper by removing the coordinator.
I see. What's the Nostr component of Void Wallet? Talk to me about why that's important.
Well, Nostr creates a communication network, a permissionless communication network, where you can talk to anyone else on the network by just knowing what their pub key is and what their relay is. So I needed these people to communicate with each other so they could share signatures and share partially signed Bitcoin transactions. So Nostr was a perfect tool. It was a free and easy and fast way to do that. Plus, it already uses the same keys as Bitcoin, so I didn't even have to install any new libraries for the wallet. So it was like a natural fit. And so I just installed some of the dependencies to make Nostr work. And then everyone has a Nostr identity, which is just one of their Bitcoin keys. And they can send partially signed Bitcoin transactions around to one another, and just keep going in a circle until all the signatures are added. And
Ah.
that's what I used Nostr for, was just the passing around of that information.
So there's a few other products we're going to get to in a moment that also use Nostr
Mhm.
that you've built. I'd love to understand what drew you into Nostr in the first place? What was your point of realization there? Because Nostr's been around now a couple of years, but mostly in the last 6-9 months is where it's got a lot of traction. Did you first come into it through the social media lens? Did you see it as something? Was this another problem you identified and were looking for a solution? How'd you first come into Nostr?
I consulted on the creation of Nostr. So
Huh.
before Fiat Jeff released it, he contacted me and Ben Ark and a couple other people, and he asked us if we would help him design this thing and help him figure out some of its starting points. So he contacted me before Nostr existed. At the time, he had something that was called Profiles. That was what it was. That was what Nostr was called originally. Was Profiles. He was like, I came up with this idea for a decentralized social network. I figured out how to let people create a profile on it, and I'm working on specking out how they can share messages with it too. Would you take a look? And so I took a look, and actually, he and I came up with the name Nostr together in that chat. Uh,
Very cool.
but yeah, so what drew me into Nostr was it was a thing a friend of mine was working on, and I wanted to support him. I thought it was a really cool idea, uh, and so we worked together on specking it out. I was also one of the contributors to NIP-04, which is the private messaging specification. I it was at that time it was Ben Ark, me, and Fiat Jaff were talking with each other on Telegram, and Ben was like, "Well, I want Nostr is pretty, or yeah, Nostr is pretty cool for doing public posts, but what if you want to have something encrypted that no one else can read but your recipient?" And so I proposed that we should make it so you could send a message to someone that's encrypted to their public key. And then Ben decided instead that he wanted it so that you would create a shared key. That way, both of you could decrypt it. You could both see the message and then decrypt it using this shared key. And so that's what they ended up going with, was his proposal. But yeah, it was just very, very early in Nostr history. I was there trying to spec it out with Fiat Jaff and Ben and a couple of other people.
That is very cool. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in the last couple of years, having watched Noster's growth, that has surprised you about the magnitude of growth or the direction that the community seems to be interested in heading? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
For something that started off in Bitcoin circles, it's quickly outpaced everything else in Bitcoin, or everything that's actually part of Bitcoin. So like there's more stars on GitHub projects relating to Nostr than there are on GitHub projects relating to the Lightning Network, for example. And most recently, with the OpenSats team decided to do a bunch of grants, and I think the number one through 10 things on their grants proposal were all Nostr projects, which is like, and they had to like justify that. They were like, well, Nostr is kind of closely related to Bitcoin, so it still counts as Bitcoin grants. I was like, no, it doesn't. But
Interesting.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's the social component. We haven't seen anything in Bitcoin take on as much success as Nostr has, and I think that's because it's social. It's a tool that's needed, and it came out at just the right time. Um, and so it's taken off because people really need censorship resistant social media right now.
Mm. Now, I have heard some people on Twitter express the view that Nostr is a distraction to Bitcoin. That Bitcoin and this task of building a money that cannot be stolen or debased by a central bank or not managed by a government, that task is more important, is the view that I've heard, and that Nostr is it's its own thing, but should not be kind of like intermingled with Bitcoin. What's your view? Do you think these two are complementary products that kind of should focus their efforts together and bring their communities together to build together, or are these things that should be separated, where Bitcoiners should kind of focus on the money stuff and Nostr folks should focus on the social stuff?
I wish I could say the latter, but I don't follow that. I don't follow that example. I do both myself. So yeah, I do think Bitcoin's more important than Nostr. I think Nostr is pretty cool, and I also do find it to be sometimes distracting. It is there's quite a bit of new stuff to be done on Nostr that is just not as important, I think, as the Bitcoin stuff. But it's a lot funner. Like you get a lot more engagement from releasing something for Nostr than you do for Bitcoin. So there's that. Um, yeah, I tried. I think I do a pretty good job of synthesizing them. I use Nostr where it's appropriate in my projects to like pass around PSBTs, for example. And I think that's a good. I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that. If someone wants to work on Nostr, more power to you. If you want to work on Bitcoin, great.
Yeah,
I invite you to do whatever you like. And
that makes
to me
sense.
that's the way forward. Personally, I like both, so I work on both.
Yeah. And one thing I like about the project you're working on as well is you're introducing a lot of really new ideas to Nostr. I think for especially the first few months, when someone heard Nostr, they thought Twitter clone, at least in the first few months of this kind of like recent phase of excitement. They immediately thought, okay, it's Twitter, but just decentralized. And you're building out this next project I want to talk about is Superstore. So this is a simple Bitcoin web store built on Nostr. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that one works?
Yeah. So with that one, you create a store event, which is just you there's a web page you go to where you say I want to create a store. You give it a name and you give it a couple of pieces of information about it, like what payment methods you'll accept, and you hit submit, and it creates an Nostr event with a certain kind, a store kind, and that's your store. Your store lives on Nostr now. It just uploads it as a message. And then to that store you've created, you add products. You reply to it, and you add you create a product that's like I'm selling mittens, and they're going to be $3 or whatever it is. You can upload, you put a picture for, you add a picture for them, and you hit submit, and it just makes a reply to your store and says, here's a product I've created for this store. And then from the front end, the front end for this just pulls in your store, pulls in all the replies to it, and creates something that looks like a web store. And then people can go through and add products to a cart, and they go and make they go to the checkout screen, and all it does is it finds your payment methods, which are attached to your store, and shows them like a Lightning invoice and a Bitcoin address, and says, here, you can pay the person here. And then when they pay, it detects the payment on either the Lightning Network or the base layer, and encodes some information for the merchant that says, like, here's the shipping address of the buyer, here's here's the products they purchased, and here's the proof of payment, like here's the transaction ID of where they sent you the money on the base layer, or here's the payment hash if they sent you the money on Lightning. And then it just fires that off as a private message to the store creator using Nostr. And then the next time the store creator opens his store, it'll show you have a sale, which is just what I call a private message. And he can review that and say, okay, he purchased 3 items. Here's where I'm supposed to ship it to, and here's the proof that he paid me. And the website automatically validates that. It makes sure and checks that you've received payment. And then you just can mark it off and say, okay, I shipped the product, and you're done with it. And it's great. So it's a really simple way to start a web store. It automatically gives you a Bitcoin address and a Bitcoin wallet and a Lightning wallet, all in the browser. And it just makes it really easy to get started with selling stuff online. I've seen a bunch of people, this is probably one of the more popular things I've made, and I've seen a bunch of people just be like, I didn't know how to start a store, but all I had to do was click go, and it did everything for me. I didn't even have to do anything. I really designed it for that precise experience. I wanted people to have that moment where they're like, wow, I didn't have to do anything. Because I've set up stores before using like WooCommerce and Shopify, and I really don't like it. They spend so much time trying to get you to customize the look of your store, and they spend so much time trying to get you connected to different payment providers. And you can spend like a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, setting up your store, and you can really lose enthusiasm for it. Like, you just had something you wanted to sell, and you had to go through all this whole rigmarole. Plus, you lose so much, a large percentage of your transaction volume to PayPal fees or MasterCard fees, or whatever fees Shopify takes for all that. And I just didn't want any of that to happen. I wanted, if someone has an idea for something that they want to sell, I wanted it to be super easy. They don't have to do any of that. They just plug in their product and hit go, and you're done. Now you have everything you need, because it's all done on Bitcoin, and all of this store stuff is on Nostr.
Right. So this would appeal to someone for the simplicity reasons, and for the keeping 100% of your payments reasons, right? Those would be the 2 big value props for someone who didn't want to go Shopify, or didn't want to go some other merchant solution. They could spin up a store real quick.
Yeah, those are 2 big selling points. I also, those are 2 of the really big ones.
Very cool. Do you think do you see a future in which everyone decides to go ahead and build their stores on Nostr? Like, what's the addressable opportunity here for an idea like this?
I don't know. I kind of think it's a really good starting point. But if your store starts to pick up a whole lot of volume, I think you would want the more advanced features of something like a Shopify or WooCommerce, where you do get to customize the look and feel, where you get well, I don't know what else. That's basically it. I think that's the only other thing people really want out of these things, and maybe fiat payments. They really want that too. Of course, then again, mine also works with Cash App, so it already has fiat payments built in, because people can scan the Lightning QR code with their Cash App and pay it that way. But I don't know. I think really it's a good starting point, and people really seem to like it for that. But I suppose if a store got really successful, they'd probably want to move on to a more professional platform.
And is it right? This is all open source, right? So anyone can just come in and just add in new features or upgrade the look and feel if they choose to, and they can modify your software as they wish.
Yep. I'm only aware of one person who's done that. A gentleman said he wanted to use my store software, but he wanted to self-host it. So I showed him, where the GitHub was, and he had a couple questions about how to to download it and add it as a GitHub page. And within about 30 minutes of him asking me about it, he had a self-hosted version that he was able to customize the look and feel, change the CSS, and make it look how he liked. And that was neat. Even that experience, even like modifying the code to make it look how he wanted, was faster than it would have been if he was trying to do it on Shopify or WooCommerce.
Very cool. Okay, let's talk about your next project, Swap Service. Now, this is an order book for, I believe, performing submarine swaps over Nostr, right?
Yeah. So I created that project because of Lightning Loop. Lightning Loop is similarly, it's a order book for creating submarine swaps over Nostr that Lightning Labs did. But Lightning Labs takes a fee on all of the Loop transactions. I'm sorry, I think I got Loop mixed up with Pool. But Lightning Labs takes a fee on all of these pool transactions, and so I wanted to make something where that didn't happen. So I made Swap Service as an alternative where you can run some software in your PC that connects to your LND node, and you can specify how much money you have on the base layer, how much money you have on Lightning, and then let people pay you to do a swap between them. And I use Alex Bosworth's submarine swaps, technology to ensure that neither party can steal from the other. So it's basically identical to the Lightning Pool service, except there's no fee, because instead of hosting all of this information on Lightning Labs servers, you're hosting all of the order book information on Nostr, and there's no charge for that.
But someone could earn a fee, right, for offering their
Right.
liquidity? So
Yeah, the person who's providing the swaps, or every person who provides a swap can set a fee and say, I want to get 5% on this, or I want to get 5,000 sats on each swap, or whatever they want. You can set it up and configure it to charge whatever fee you like, and then the order book is sorted from cheapest to most expensive for each swap.
I see. So instead of Lightning Labs or Bolts earning fees for these swaps, it's now opened up so that anyone can step in, become a provider, earn a fee for their liquidity. And
including them. Like Lightning Labs could make all of their pool swaps available on Swap Service, and Bolts could too. They could just make it as be one of the swap providers there. And then if they're competitive, if they have cheaper rates than anyone else, people will use their service instead of other people on Swap Service.
Right. People often talk about how, open networks always win over closed networks. Do you think that is going to be true in this world of Lightning swaps as well, where we have two kind of closed off kind of order books, I guess you'd call them, for Lightning Labs and for Bolts, and here's an open one. Now anyone can participate. Do you think that it's natural that everyone will migrate to an open order book and that will have the deepest liquidity?
Nope. So far, it's not true at all. There in the first week that it was available, there was like one guy who was providing swaps on Swap Service, and after that he stopped because he had zero volume, zero customers, and so he stopped doing it. And since then, there's been not a single offer. Yeah, there are lots of offers on Lightning Pool. There's lots of offers on Bolts. There's also DZ has a great one, and Amboss has their swap tool as well. And I think people are pretty satisfied with the closed source, solutions. I don't think there's any demand for an open source one. So no, I don't think I don't think it'll see any success or adoption or traction at all.
Is that just because it hasn't so far, or do you think there's some fundamental reason why this situation is going to be different from other situations where open networks do win?
I think part of the reason why it won't take off is due to lack of advertising. So Lightning Labs is able to put a link to to their pool service directly in LND. So it's one of the command line options for it. It's the developers who are trying to build applications on top of Lightning. They're probably running LND, and they're probably going to see that as an option baked into that service. And they're not going to see Swap Service. They're going to see Pool. And then the Amboss people, a lot of people go on Amboss to hook up their node and kind of advertise that it's theirs, and here's how you can contact them if you're trying to set up channels or whatever, and they're gonna go there for those reasons, and they're gonna see Amboss's swap service, so they're gonna use that one. Similar things apply to bolts. They all of these things offer unique features that bring customers, and DZ as well. They have unique features that bring customers to their website for other reason, and then they see the swap options once they're there. And I think that's gonna win the day, is the fact that these guys have they have like a funnel. They have a funnel that draws people to their service, whereas swap service, I'm not interested in advertising it. I don't make any revenue from it. So it'll just sit there and be an option. But yeah,
Right.
because the market is already satisfied with existing options, I don't think it'll see any adoption.
Okay, so distribution is very important there. But then there is still the possibility, though, that someone else comes along and says, "Hey, I want to compete against all those closed offerings. I want to use this open order book system.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll take a small fee, but I'll have an open order book, and if I have distribution myself, then I can maybe compete and maybe woo some users to this product." Is that?
You can certainly try. I think part of the big draw of swap service is that there is no fee. The only fee you pay is the fee that the swap provider wants you to pay. There's no like coordinator fee. And if you add that in, I think you'll find it hard to compete with Lightning Labs or Bolts Exchange or the others. I think you'll find that if once you add that in, you're equal to or greater than the fees they charge. They're quite fair. I think they're pretty reasonable with their fees, and I think people are quite happy to pay a reasonable fee to someone who's offering a cheap, reliable service. So yeah, I don't really see there being for the foreseeable future, unless all of them start like getting in cahoots and trying to overcharge their customers, which I really doubt will happen. For the foreseeable future, I just think the market will be satisfied by the existing options.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Stackwork. Stackwork is a Lightning-powered platform for generating high-quality transcripts of all your audio or video content. They combine AI engines and hundreds of human workers all over the world who are paid over the Lightning Network to assemble these transcripts. And that's what lets Stackwork create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. To see the results for yourself, you can check out my personal website where I host transcripts for all my podcast episodes. If you want to learn more about Stackwork, visit stackwork.com. That is STAK work.com. How big do you think the swaps market will be? So Bitcoin on chain to Bitcoin on Lightning and back. How important is that swapping functionality going to be at a time when we, let's say we see significant Lightning adoption, we have billions on board, where everyone's slinging sats around. What is the importance of that bridge between Bitcoins on-chain and Lightning?
Well, bridging between the two is absolutely necessary, because otherwise, if you couldn't bridge into Lightning, you couldn't use Lightning. But there are multiple ways to do it, and there are better ways to do it than submarine swaps. And hopefully those methods, the better methods, will actually see more traction. So, for example, opening and closing channels is a way of bridging in and out of the Lightning Network. And it's cheaper to do those than it is to do a submarine swap. So more wallets that allow you to manage your own channels and open and close them would be great. And that also enables self-custody as well. So moving toward a future where people have self-custody and don't need to use a swap service to get out of the Lightning Network would be a great future. And then there's also Bolt 12, or not Bolt 12, splicing. There's splicing that Async just added in, which allows you to cooperate with your counterparty to create a base layer Bitcoin transaction that moves funds out of a Lightning channel and sends it to a base layer address. And that's cheaper and better than doing submarine swaps. So if we see more implementations, the Lightning Network adds support for that, then hopefully a successor to swap service will come out that lets you more easily coordinate that right in your wallet. And then you won't need swap service at all, because you'll have a cheaper and more efficient way of doing swaps, of bridging in and out of Lightning by means of that. I hope that that's what happens with the market.
And do you think we'll see businesses that their entire company, their entire operation is focused on bridging assets, and they can sustainably generate revenue or fees from either bridging through swaps or opening and closing channels?
No, I don't suppose we will see companies with that as their sole focus. I think it's
Mm,
more likely that that would be one offering of a company. Like a company would do a bunch of stuff on Lightning,
right.
and one of them would be they have a bridging service.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, let's get into your next product, Bitpac. And this is one of your most recent ones. It is publicly auditable cooperatives on Bitcoin. Tell me more about how they work.
Yeah. So with Bitpac, you define a set of people who you want to be part of a multi-signature Bitcoin address. Excuse me. So a multi-signature Bitcoin address is this thing you can do in Bitcoin where you have multiple keys inside of an address. Normally, a Bitcoin address is just the hash of a single public key, yours, whoever has that wallet. And then when you receive money into that address, you can spend from it using your private key. But you can create a Bitcoin address that has multiple public keys, 5, 10, 30, 60, and just have a bunch of people control that money. That way, they all have to agree on how to move the money in that address. And then the next thing you can do after you've got a whole bunch of people in an address is you can define a threshold. You can say like, we have 10 people in this address, but only 5 of them need to agree in order to spend the money, or it's 6 of them or 7 of them or whatever number you want between 1 and 10. And then you can have that be like a threshold for who can spend. So I used this technology, this existing multi-signature stuff that Bitcoin's had since day one, to enable voting. So in Bitpac, you create a multi-signature, you define a threshold, and so let's say you pick 10 people to be in your Bitpac, you plug all their pub keys in, you make the multi-signature address, and you define that 7 of them have to agree in order to spend the money. Then it gives you a nice fancy little page where you can see how much money is in the address, and you can see proposals for what to do with it. And so any key holder can create a proposal, and this is all done using Nostr again. Any key holder can create a proposal that says, I would like to send $50 to hire a graphic designer. Well, you probably need to pay more than $50 for that, but $50,000 to hire a graphic designer. And everyone can see, he wants to spend this. Here's how much money we have in our treasury. Here's where he wants to send the money to, and they get approve and reject buttons. And so all you're doing when you hit approve is you sign that Bitcoin transaction, and you broadcast your signature so everyone else can see it. And if enough people vote to have it go through, then you reach your threshold of 7, and now you have 7 signatures, which is all you need on Bitcoin to make it happen. So there you go. The money goes to its destination. Or if a bunch of people hit the reject button, then they just fire off a message that says, I'm not voting in favor of this. And if enough of those votes come in, then you can say, okay, there's no chance of meeting the threshold now. So you just bury that proposal, and it doesn't happen. So Bitpac allows you, it takes standard Bitcoin multi-signature technology, but gives it an interface that looks like you're voting on something. And I think that's kind of cool because it allows you to emulate the experience of voting, which is kind of cool. And I think people like doing that. They like to say, I contributed my vote to, what to do with this money. So that's what Bitpac is for, is to emulate that real world experience and bring it into Bitcoin.
Right. That's really cool because I especially like the interface where I think when people vote today, it's like especially in like political elections, they'll vote for a candidate. Candidate either wins or loses, and they now have no more visibility into anything. The dollars that come into the government that candidate is in charge of using and deploying, that voter has no say in that anymore. They
Mm-hmm.
have no visibility into where their tax dollars go. But I think it'd be really cool if could this be applied to like a government budget where you say tax dollars go in, all the members that are making a decision in a government have a vote,
Mm-hmm.
and if you surpass a certain threshold, we're going to build this new park in the city, and it's going to cost this much money. Everyone votes. If yes, then all the money goes to fund the park. Is
Yes, you
that
can
the
you
idea?
can do that. And one of the fun things you can do with it is you can also vote to send money to subcommittees. So you can define from your big Bitpac of 100 senators, you can have 5 of them be a subcommittee, and you create a Bitpac for those guys, and you allocate them a budget. The 100 senators vote to put $2 million from the main treasury into the subcommittee's own little treasury, and then they get to use that money to vote among a much smaller group of people on what to do to build the actual park. So you can like break out subgroups from your Bitpac and make subcommittees and fund them, which is I just think it's a really cool feature.
Yeah, it is really cool. That's
And
something that I think governments should be, especially the ones that are trying to be fiscally responsible, that are trying to like really put forth their best effort to like fund people's initiatives and use their money wisely. I think this would be a great way to differentiate yourself. Like, I wonder if, I don't know if you've had a chance to, mention this to Bukele on Twitter, or if if he's seen a link of this, but I think that would be something that his government would, might consider embracing. Like, why not, show that, hey, we're operating on this Bitcoin standard. Here's our Bitcoin budget.
and we're publicly
Here's all our initiatives. And here's exactly where the money goes. I think that'd be really cool.
That would be really cool. You've got bigger reach than I do. Why don't you tweet about it to Bukele and tell him to check it out?
Maybe I will.
Another thing you can do, I imagine things like football clubs using this, or soccer clubs. So like I have a brother who's really big into, like Australian rules football, and he's in a club, and they have their whole team contributes membership dues to a little treasury, and they have a treasurer whose job it is to like buy jerseys and schedule games in other countries and get plane tickets for everyone and all that stuff. I think it'd be really cool for stuff like that to be done using a Bitpac. Like, you could have everybody contribute their membership dues straight into the common treasury, and have a rule like, if you don't pay for 3 months, then we kick you out by just moving the funds into a new Bitpac that doesn't have you in it. It's
right.
all for 15 members of the club minus one. You could do that with this, and then once again, you have, instead of having a treasurer who has all that money in his bank account, the money's just all publicly visible in this Bitpac, and the members of the club vote on what to do with it. Like, we all need plane tickets, so let's write a proposal to purchase the plane tickets. Here's the Bitcoin address of Cheap Air or whatever, and here's we're gonna pay this off. You can totally do stuff like that with Bitpac and make it so that you can have little clubs that manage money in an accountable way.
Yeah, I'm sure accountants would love this. I mean, I cannot say I'm very proficient in accounting, but I know that accountants would love this. Just being able to watch the money flow and decide who gets to make decisions on things like this. This is definitely something that I think they should be looking into.
Yeah, and I think one worry, if anyone's been in a club before, one thing you have to occasionally worry about is what happens if your treasurer's bank account gets frozen. Like, the treasurer usually keeps the money at his own bank. And if his bank goes out of business or he gets in trouble or whatever, you can have a situation where, like, guys, our money's locked up because he lost his account or whatever. But with Bitpac, that can't happen because it's all on Bitcoin, and that just makes it so that no one's in control of it except the voters in your Bitpac.
Right. And I guess the treasurer could even decide to run off with the money, right? Like before Bitpac.
Yeah. But not with it.
Right. Okay, let's get into, there's two other products, Spacechain Launcher and Handcrank. Can you talk a little bit about those two?
Sure, yeah. So Ruben Thompson is another Bitcoin inventor who came up with the idea of space chains a couple years ago. And basically a space chain is a type of Bitcoin sidechain where you use Bitcoin to prevent double spends on the side chain, and you use Bitcoin to follow or to guarantee the order of transactions on the space chain or on the side chain. And how you do that is you have a separate network, a separate blockchain. That's the side chain. Transactions are created on the side chain and they go into blocks. And then every time there's a new block created on the side chain, you hash it. You take a hash of that and you put its hash on Bitcoin in like an op return transaction. And then you can follow the order of blocks on the sidechain by following the order of hashes on Bitcoin. That also prevents double spends because unless you're able to rewrite Bitcoin's chain to like undo one of those hashes that got put in there, you also can't undo blocks on the sidechain because everyone's using Bitcoin to follow what blocks are on there. So he came up with this idea a couple years ago, and then I implemented it in my Spacechain launcher and made it so that anyone can start one of these things. And so it creates a Bitcoin address, and you put some money into it, just enough money to pay for one op return. And then you do that. You just create a block on your sidechain, hash it, and put the block's hash on Bitcoin in an op return. And you keep doing that over and over again, and you can just see how it works. It just lets you see, here's how you create transactions on the sidechain. Here's how you put them into a block, and here's how you hash it and put it into Bitcoin. It makes it really easy for anyone to experiment with these things. And that's what Spacechain Launcher is for, is just to be a proof of concept of how these things work and let anyone play with making sidechains. Handcrank is an idea I had because I really like drive chains. If you're familiar with those, they're a sidechain proposal that allows you to do a two-way peg between Bitcoin and the sidechain, where you can put money onto the sidechain from Bitcoin and then take it off again when you're done using the sidechain and still have the same amount, unless you lost some while you were over there. So I really like drive chains, and I wish we had them in Bitcoin. And so I came up with Handcrank as a way to try and make it easier to get them in. So Handcrank is not software; it's just a proposal. It's just a text document that outlines a way in which you could kind of get some of the features of drive chains without needing everyone in Bitcoin to upgrade to add a soft fork. And so the way I propose doing it involves creating a multi-signature address where a bunch of miners control the money in it. And then you deposit however much you want on this sidechain into that address. And then the miners get to vote on what to do with that money. Just like, actually, it's not that dissimilar from Bitpac, really. You could probably use Bitpac to make Handcrank. That's just kind of a good idea. I might think about that. But yeah, so they vote on what to do with the money, and what they're supposed to do is, on drive chain, what's supposed to happen is when you're finished on the drive chain, you can put an address where you want your money to go to, and then Bitcoin nodes enforce a rule that the money on Bitcoin, the money that you deposited onto the drive chain, has to go to whatever address you specify when you're done. So with Handcrank, I do the same thing, except I have miners just vote on sending the money there. And the miners have to check and make sure that you own that money on the drive chain or on the side chain, on the Handcrank side chain. And if you do, and now you're trying to withdraw it, then they vote to let you have it on Bitcoin. And that's basically it. Handcrank is just a way to use multi-signature voting and trusting miners to allow you to do side chains on Bitcoin.
What do you think people might use side chains for on Bitcoin, like with drive chain and with space chains? What are some of the functionalities that you hope this could enable for people?
Well, I see three things that when people talk about side chains, there's three things they seem to really want them for. One of them is a privacy side chain, something that has the same zero knowledge proof scheme as Monero uses to hide the sender, hide the recipient, and hide the amount. Hide the amount being transferred. A lot of people really want one of those for Bitcoin, and just clone Monero, make it a Bitcoin sidechain, make it so I can take $2,000 of Bitcoin, put it on this Monero-like sidechain for Bitcoin. It still stays, worth that amount of Bitcoin, and then I do some privacy stuff. I obscure who has the money or whatever, and I take the remainder off again and put it back on Bitcoin, and no one can see what happened while I was on the privacy sidechain. So that's one. I think people really want that. The next one is a sidechain that has more expressive scripting language than Bitcoin does. So something like an Ethereum sidechain or a sidechain that's similar to Liquid. They really want one of those, I think, where you could take some Bitcoin, put it on this more expressive chain, do DeFi stuff with it, do lotteries, gambling, all the stuff you can do on Ethereum and on Liquid, but still not have the concern that someone can run off with your money. And so once you're done using this sidechain, you take your money off, put it back into Bitcoin, and now it's on Bitcoin again. I think they really want that. And then the last one is big blocks, a sidechain that's designed for scaling, so that if someone can't afford to make transactions on Bitcoin, you can have them get an address on the sidechain, they receive their money there, and it's cheaper because it has really big blocks. And then if they get rich and if they're able to afford transacting on Bitcoin now, they can bridge off of it and go into regular Bitcoin and have their money there. So those are the three that I hear people really want: privacy one, more expressive one, and a big block one. And yeah, that's basically the answer to your question.
Very interesting. Okay, I want to get into now the roadmap for Super Testnet. I want to hear about the ideas that you're thinking about in your head, that you're excited about today, that you haven't yet built, but you plan to build.
Yeah, well, a couple of ones that I've been working on this week. I want to make a browser extension that works like MetaMask or like Alby, except for the base layer. I really like the experience of using a browser. Well, actually, I don't like browser extensions, but I really like the idea of having a wallet that's integrated into your web browser, so that people can propose. A website can propose, we want you to add these inputs and these outputs to a transaction, and then you can just click approve. Like, you can see what it's asking you to do and click approve. And I really like that experience. So I want to do that. That's one thing I've been working on this week. Another thing, I want to implement a price gambling website where you can gamble on the price of Bitcoin and get money if you win. I'd really like to do that. I'd love to do more stuff in the lending space. I want to make a peer-to-peer lending machine so that you can lend your friends some money and then get an interest rate on that, or lend anyone money and get an interest rate on that. That would be really cool. And yeah, those are some of the things that are on my roadmap.
Very cool. I'm excited to see them. Let's finish off this conversation with the lightning round. I do this at the end of every show. Got a few rapid fire questions for you. You ready?
I refuse to do the lightning round.
Okay, well then in that case, why don't we just finish off with where people can go to learn more about you and follow along with your work?
Okay. Yeah, my GitHub's probably the best place. So if you go to github.com/supertestnet, all one word, no underscores or anything, supertestnet. That's where you can follow my projects and check out what I'm working on. Also, I'm on Twitter. You can go to twitter.com/super_testnet. There's an underscore in that one. And you can follow me there. That's also probably the best place to contact me if you want to work on some kind of project together or use something I've invented as part of your business. I'm happy to help you in any way you like. If you go to pleblab.com, that's a great place to find out information about me and about what I do, because I work there every day. So check out pleblab.com, and then you can find me on Nostr. If you go search on whatever your favorite Nostr client is for Super Testnet, you'll probably find me on there as well. You might have to various ones use different fields from Nostr as search terms, so you might have to try various things like putting an underscore in or keeping them as two separate words or whatever. But it should be able to find me by searching for some variation of Super Testnet on Nostr, on your favorite Nostr client.
Awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat, and I hope we can do it again soon. And if we do it again soon, I will have double the lightning round questions ready for you.
I'll still refuse to do them, so that'll be great.
Awesome. Thanks again for the time.
Thanks, Kevin. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
You too. In the last 30 days, you guys sent in 29,345 sats, and that came in from 28 different supporters. Thank you to everyone who's been contributing to the show. Let's run through a few comments from last episode. Blockchain Boog sent 5,000 sats and said, I'm still skeptical on Fedi. I think the ruggings and frauds will explode, but I hope I'm wrong. Nico B said, I double checked that I'm not listening with 2 times podcast speed because Cody was talking so fast. Cody had a lot to cover. He was full of information. It was great to see. But yeah, you might have to lower your podcast speed if you want to absorb everything, or just listen to it twice. SMRTAK sent in 1,234 sats, sent a lightning bolt emoji on episode 111 with Graham Krizik. Michael Matulef said, great conversation with an orange heart on episode 112 with Cody Lowe. The Bullish Bitcoiner said, bullish on Nodeless on episode 104 with UTXO. FaZe and HODL sent 1,000 sats and said, wow, this was packed. really clarifies how current fiat rails simply cannot serve the micropayments that AI requires. It also made me bullish on AI, Lightning, and Fedimints. It's at 1,000 sats again on episode 112. And Kate created a clip from episode 112. Thank you to everyone who's been contributing. It means a lot. I love reading these comments, and I can't wait to see what you guys send in this week.